Malik Patterson had always dreamed of owning a beautiful home in a peaceful, upscale neighborhood. After years of hard work, saving every penny, and overcoming countless obstacles, he had finally done it. The house, a stunning 2-story brick home in Brentwood Estates, Tennessee, was everything he had envisioned. It had a neatly trimmed front lawn, a wraparound porch perfect for enjoying a quiet evening, and a spacious backyard where he could host barbecues and relax under the stars. This was his reward, a symbol of everything he had worked for. But from the moment he arrived, something felt off. As the moving truck pulled into the driveway, Malik stepped out and stretched, taking in the sight of his new home with a sense of pride. This was it. This was where he would settle down. Yet, as he began unloading boxes, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. A quick glance toward the neighboring houses confirmed it. Behind half-closed curtains, through slightly parted blinds, there were eyes. Watching, observing, studying. He spotted a woman walking her dog on the sidewalk, her steps slowing as she passed by his house. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just stared a moment too long before turning away. A man across the street stood on his porch, pretending to check his phone, but his gaze kept flicking up toward Malik. Others peeked through their windows, their faces disappearing the moment he looked in their direction. It was an eerie kind of silence. No friendly introductions, no curious neighbors coming over to say welcome, no casual chit-chat about the best places to eat in town. Nothing. Maybe they just kept to themselves, Malik told himself as he carried another box inside. Maybe they were reserved, private people who didn't do the whole welcome wagon thing. He wasn't about to make assumptions. Still, the weight of their stares followed him through the day, pressing against his back with every step he took. Even as the sun dipped below the horizon and he finally sat on his new porch with a cold beer in hand, he could feel it, that unspoken presence lingering in the air. His new neighbors weren't just indifferent. They were waiting, watching, and Malik had no idea why. The next morning, just as Malik was pouring his first cup of coffee in his brand new kitchen, a sharp knock at the door interrupted the quiet. It wasn't the kind of casual, neighborly knock. It was firm, purposeful, the kind that carried authority. Malik set his mug down, straightened his t-shirt, and walked to the door. The moment he opened it, he was met with the sight of a woman who looked like she had stepped right out of country club luncheon. She stood tall, stiff posture, her hands folded neatly over a clipboard. Mid-60s, perfectly styled blonde hair, pearl earrings, and a beige cardigan clipped with a small pin that read HOA President. Her expression was neutral, but there was something in her eyes, something cold, assessing. "Good morning," she said, her tone clipped and efficient. "I'm Barbara Whitman, president of the Brentwood Estates Homeowners Association." Malik extended a hand, offering a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, I know who you are," she cut in quickly, barely sparing him a glance before her gaze drifted past him, scanning the inside of the house. Her eyes flicked over the boxes stacked near the entrance, the furniture still covered in moving blankets, the half-unpacked kitchen visible from the doorway. She took it all in with a sharp, sweeping glance before returning her attention to him, her lips pressing together in what almost looked like disapproval. "I wanted to go over a few things," she said, pulling a thick stack of stapled documents from her clipboard and handing them to him. Malik glanced down. HOA guidelines. As he skimmed through the first few pages, he recognized the usual restrictions: lawn maintenance rules, exterior paint color regulations, approved mailbox designs. The kind of fine print details that made HOA communities both orderly and, if mismanaged, suffocating. Then Barbara cleared her throat. "We like to maintain a certain standard here," she said, her eyes shifting toward the moving truck still parked in his driveway. "I assume you'll have that removed by this evening?" Malik raised an eyebrow. He had barely finished unpacking, but he kept his voice level. "It'll be gone once I'm done moving in," he replied evenly. Barbara nodded, but not in approval. More like she was making a mental note. "Good," she said. "And just so you're aware, the HOA requires that trash bins be placed at the curb no earlier than 6 a.m. on collection day. I noticed yours were out last night." Malik blinked. "I didn't put them out," he said. "The previous owners must have." Barbara pursed her lips. "I see. A long pause. Then, in a tone that almost sounded like a warning, she added, "Well, in the future, please be mindful. We have rules for a reason." And just like that, she turned on her heel and walked away. Malik stood there for a moment, the stack of papers still in his hand, watching as Barbara made her way down the driveway with the same rigid posture she had arrived with. He exhaled slowly and shut the door. Maybe she was just particular. Some HOA presidents were. Maybe she treated every new resident this way, making sure they understood the rules. But something about her tone, about the way she had looked at him, not to him, but through him, told him this wasn't just about the HOA. And he had a feeling this wasn't the last time he'd be seeing Barbara Whitman. The first notice arrived the very next morning. Malik stepped outside to grab his mail and found a neatly folded letter tucked inside his mailbox, sealed with the official Brentwood Estates HOA stamp. He frowned, opening it right there on his porch. Violation notice, unauthorized vehicle in driveway. His car. Malik let out a short laugh. He had parked in his own driveway, the same way every other homeowner on the street did. Yet somehow, he was in violation. He shook his head, folded the paper, and set it aside. Maybe it was just an overzealous enforcement of the rules. Maybe. 2 days later, another letter. Violation notice. Lawn maintenance required. He read it twice. His lawn was fine. The grass had grown, sure, but barely. He had seen plenty of yards in the neighborhood with grass longer than his. Yet, here was a formal warning, instructing him to trim it immediately to comply with HOA regulations. By the end of the week, a third notice arrived. Porch light intensity violation. Malik stared at the paper in disbelief. His porch light, the same one that had been installed before he even moved in, was apparently too bright and needed to be replaced. He stepped outside that evening and looked around. Up and down the street, dozens of houses had similar porch lights, some even brighter than his. Not a single one had a warning posted on their door. It was clear what was happening. This wasn't about rules. This was about him. Barbara wasn't just enforcing HOA policies. She was weaponizing them. At first, Malik tried to brush it off. He told himself that if he just followed the rules, if he did everything by the book, the harassment would stop. But the warnings kept coming, each one more absurd than the last. He was fined for leaving his trash bins out. On the same day, his neighbor's bins remained untouched. He was cited for an unauthorized patio arrangement because of the 2 wicker chairs on his porch, while just across the street, someone had an entire set of mismatched plastic chairs sitting in plain sight. It was never enough. No matter how closely he followed the rules, Barbara always found something. And she wasn't acting alone. One evening, Malik decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, hoping to clear his mind. He passed a group of neighbors gathered in a driveway, chatting casually, until they saw him. The conversation stopped. A woman offered a tight, forced smile. The others simply looked away, shifting uncomfortably, pretending to be suddenly interested in their phones, their feet, the sky. Anything but him. And standing at the center of them all was Barbara. She didn't look away. She didn't pretend not to notice him. Instead, she held his gaze, arms crossed over her chest, and then, just barely, she smirked. That was the moment Malik knew. This wasn't about HOA violations. This wasn't about maintaining community standards. This was about him. They didn't want him there, and Barbara was making sure he knew it. Malik had played along long enough. For weeks, he had watched as Barbara bombarded him with violation notices, each one more ridiculous than the last. He had tried to follow the rules, to stay out of trouble, but it was obvious now, no amount of compliance would ever be enough. So, if Barbara wanted to play games, he was going to play too. Late one evening, after yet another warning letter appeared in his mailbox, Malik decided it was time to fight back. Instead of tossing it into the growing pile on his kitchen counter, he grabbed his phone and stepped outside. He took a slow, deliberate walk around the neighborhood, paying attention to every single house. He counted the ones with overgrown lawns, cracked driveways, peeling paint. He noted trash bins that had been left out long past collection day, cars parked on the street for days without moving, front porches cluttered with furniture and decorations far more elaborate than his 2 wicker chairs. And yet, not a single violation notice had been taped to their doors. Not a single one. Malik snapped photos, carefully documenting every infraction. He made sure to include timestamps, addresses, everything he would need. Then he compiled it all into a detailed email and sent it straight to the HOA board, addressing the message not just to Barbara, but to every member involved in enforcing the rules. His email was polite, professional. I would appreciate some clarification regarding the enforcement of HOA regulations. As I understand, the community guidelines apply to all homeowners equally. However, I've observed several violations that do not appear to have been addressed. I have attached photographic evidence for your review. I would appreciate insight into why certain properties have been overlooked while my home continues to receive citations. Looking forward to your response. Then he waited. 2 days passed. No response. On the third day, there was another knock at his door. Barbara. This time, she didn't have a stack of violation notices. She wasn't holding a clipboard filled with HOA policies. Instead, she had a single document in her hand. The moment Malik opened the door, she held it out to him, her expression tight, her lips pressed into that thin, forced smile she always wore when she was trying to act civil. "I need you to fill this out," she said, her voice syrupy but firm. Malik took the paper and glanced at the heading. Request for proof of homeownership. His jaw tightened. "Excuse me. We've received complaints," Barbara continued, clasping her hands together like she was delivering unfortunate news. "Several neighbors have expressed concerns about unusual activity at this property. Cars coming and going at odd hours. Furniture deliveries. Some are worried you may be renting this home in violation of HOA regulations." Malik let out a short, humorless laugh. "You're kidding." Barbara's expression didn't change. "You'll need to provide proof that you're the legal owner of this property," she said smoothly. "A deed, a purchase agreement, just something to verify that everything is in order." Malik stared at her, stunned for a brief moment at just how bold she was. Then he took a deep breath, reining in his anger. She wanted him to snap. She wanted him to raise his voice, to get defensive, to give her an excuse to turn him into the problem. Instead, he smiled. "You can pull the records yourself," he said evenly. "It's public information." Barbara's fingers tightened around her clipboard. "I'd prefer if you submitted it directly," she replied, her voice still calm, but her eyes flashing with something else. Malik tilted his head. "And if I don't?" Barbara's lips curled ever so slightly, her version of a smirk. "Then I'll have no choice but to escalate the matter with the HOA board." Malik exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the paper in his hand. She wasn't backing down, but neither was he. "I'll think about it," he said simply, then stepped back and shut the door in her face. Barbara stood there for a few seconds before finally turning and walking away. That evening, as Malik sat on his porch, he spotted her again. This time, she wasn't alone. A man in khakis and a polo shirt stood beside her at the end of his driveway, scribbling something down in a notepad as she gestured toward Malik's house, whispering in hushed tones. She wasn't just trying to intimidate him anymore. She was looking for a way to get rid of him. But what she didn't know was that Malik was already 10 steps ahead. 3 days after Barbara's last visit, Malik found a thick envelope sitting in his mailbox. There was no HOA logo this time. This was from a law firm. He already knew, before even opening it, that whatever was inside wasn't good. Inside, he found an official complaint filed with the Davidson County Housing Authority. The accusation? Malik was a fraudulent occupant. Barbara had taken things to the next level. She was no longer content with throwing HOA violations at him. No, now she was trying to have him legally removed from his own home. The document was filled with vague, baseless claims, allegations that he had failed to provide proof of ownership, suspicions that he was illegally renting the property, a statement that multiple neighbors had expressed concerns about his presence. There were no actual names, no real evidence. Just a collection of carefully worded assumptions wrapped in legal jargon, designed to exhaust him. She didn't want to evict him. She wanted to drown him in paperwork, to push him into a battle so frustrating and expensive that he'd eventually decide it wasn't worth the fight. She wanted him to give up. But what Barbara didn't know was that Malik had no intention of walking away. That evening, he made a call. "Hey, Joe," he said when the line picked up. "I need a favor." Joe Martinez had been Malik's real estate attorney for years. Sharp, relentless, and twice as ruthless as Barbara could ever hope to be. By the next morning, Malik had everything he needed. 3 days later, the emergency HOA board meeting was packed. Barbara sat at the head of the long conference table, her expression calm, collected. The other board members flanked her, some looking uncomfortable, others pretending to be deeply engrossed in the paperwork in front of them. The room buzzed with whispered conversations as homeowners shifted in their seats, throwing Malik occasional glances. They had all heard the rumors. They knew something big was about to happen. Barbara cleared her throat, lifting a printed document. "We are here to address the ongoing issue regarding Mr. Patterson's residence," she began smoothly. "Given the numerous violations and the concerns raised by our community members, I'd like to speak," Malik interrupted. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the room like a blade. Barbara's lips thinned. "You'll have a chance to respond after." "No," Malik said, setting down a thick stack of papers in front of him. "I'm speaking now." A murmur spread through the room. Barbara stiffened, clearly not used to being challenged so directly. Malik stood, unfolding the first document. "This," he said, holding up the deed to his house, "is legal proof that I own my home. Filed, recorded, and indisputable." Some of the board members exchanged glances. A few heads turned in the audience. Malik set the deed down and pulled out another paper. "This," he continued, "is the purchase agreement for another property, 214 Oakwood Drive." Barbara's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Then Malik pulled out the final document. "And this," he said, letting the words hang in the air for a moment, "is the deed for 216 Oakwood Drive." Silence. Barbara's house. The room went still. The same woman who had spent weeks trying to have him removed had just found out, in front of everyone, that her own home belonged to him. And she hadn't even known. Barbara's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "Ow," she finally asked, her voice quieter now, almost uncertain. Malik folded his arms. "You might want to check the HOA records, Barbara. That foreclosure you ignored? The property sale that went through last month." He let a slow smirk curl at the edge of his lips. "I was the buyer." A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. Barbara's hands clenched around the papers in front of her. Malik tilted his head. "So tell me, Barbara," he said, his voice steady, cool, deliberate. "Who's the real trespasser now?" And just like that, the entire room shifted. The silence that followed Malik's words was deafening. Barbara's fingers twitched against the table, her face drained of color. The composure she had carefully maintained throughout the meeting, the authority she had wielded over this community for years, was slipping, cracking at the edges. Someone in the back of the room whispered, "Did he just say he owns her house?" Another murmur. A chair scraped against the floor. The shift was happening. People were realizing that Barbara Whitman, the woman who had spent years enforcing HOA policies like they were law, the woman who had targeted Malik with violation after violation, the woman who had just tried to have him removed from his own home, was now sitting in a house that he owned. Barbara's mouth finally opened, but no words came out. Malik let the weight of the moment settle before speaking again. "You know," he said, tapping the papers on the table, "when I moved into this neighborhood, I thought the HOA was just strict, that maybe you were just particular about the rules." He turned his gaze to the board members, making sure to meet each of their eyes. "But this was never about HOA policies, was it?" His voice was steady, deliberate. "It was about control. It was about deciding who you think belongs here." Barbara flinched as if the words had struck her. Across the table, Stephen Reynolds, the HOA vice president, cleared his throat. He was sweating now, shifting in his chair. "Mr. Patterson," he started, his voice forced, "we appreciate your concerns, but..." Malik didn't let him finish. "No, Stephen, you don't get to downplay this." He turned back to Barbara. "You accuse me of breaking rules that don't exist. You sent violation after violation for things my neighbors have never been cited for. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to use legal loopholes to have me removed from my home." Barbara's jaw tightened. "I was acting in the best interest of the community." Malik let out a short laugh. "Were you?" because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the community didn't even know you were about to lose your own house." A fresh wave of whispers spread through the crowd. People exchanged looks, some leaning toward each other, murmuring under their breath. The power that Barbara had once commanded in this room was slipping away, and she knew it. Malik pulled out one final document. "And one more thing," he said, setting it down in front of her. "You're behind on your HOA fees." Barbara's head snapped up. "That's a lie." Malik tapped the paper. "I bought your house at auction, remember? That includes the debt attached to it. According to these records, you owe the HOA over $3,000 in unpaid fees and fines." A new kind of hush fell over the room. Stephen adjusted his glasses, frowning as he read over the document. His discomfort was almost palpable as he turned toward Barbara. "Barbara," he said, his voice quieter now, "is this true?" Barbara didn't answer. Lisa Hendricks, one of the longtime residents, let out a breath and shook her head. "You mean to tell me she's been out here harassing people over grass and porch lights when she hasn't even been paying her own dues?" More voices rose in agreement. People were no longer whispering. Now they were talking openly, freely, no longer afraid to challenge the woman who had ruled over them for years. Barbara opened her mouth, struggling to regain control, but it was too late. The narrative had shifted, and everyone could see her for what she was. Malik leaned back in his chair. "I suggest you start paying up," he said coolly. "Wouldn't want to violate any of your own rules, would you?" Someone chuckled. Then another. Barbara's face burned red. Stephen sighed heavily, rubbing his temples before finally speaking. "The board has the authority to remove an HOA officer if they are found to be abusing their position." He looked at the other members. "I think it's time we put that to a vote." One by one, hands started going up around the room. Barbara's breath hitched. Her eyes darted around, as if looking for someone, anyone, to defend her. But there was no one. The same people who had stood by her side, who had once nodded in agreement with her every decision, were now turning against her. Stephen cleared his throat, glancing down at his notes before making it official. By majority vote, Barbara Whitman is hereby removed as president of the Brentwood Estates HOA. Effective immediately. A final, irreversible decision. Barbara's entire body went rigid. She shoved her papers into a folder, pushing back her chair so forcefully that it nearly toppled over. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped, her voice sharp with barely contained rage. She marched toward the exit, heels clicking against the tiled floor. But for the first time, no one followed her. Malik exhaled, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. Barbara had spent weeks trying to control him, trying to make his life miserable. And now, in front of the entire HOA, she had lost everything. But something told him she wasn't done just yet. A week after the HOA meeting, just as the dust was beginning to settle, Malik heard another knock at his door. This one wasn't sharp and authoritative like before. It was slower, hesitant. When he opened it, Barbara Whitman stood on his porch. She wasn't alone. Beside her, her husband Richard, an older man with a stiff posture and a deep frown, stood with his hands tucked into the pockets of his slacks. There was no clipboard in Barbara's hands this time, no violation notice tucked under her arm, just a quiet, strained silence between them. Malik crossed his arms. "Something I can help you with." Barbara's lips pressed into a tight line before she finally spoke. "I'd like to discuss the sale of my home," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. Malik had expected this. He had seen it before, the way people like Barbara operated. She had spent weeks trying to force him out of his home, using every trick at her disposal to make his life miserable. But now that the tables had turned, now that she was the one facing the possibility of losing her place in the neighborhood, she suddenly wanted to negotiate. "I'm not selling," Malik said simply. Barbara's jaw clenched. "I've lived in that house for 32 years. Malik tilted his head. "And yet, you never paid off the debt attached to it." Richard finally spoke. "We're prepared to offer you a fair price," he said, his voice low and measured. Malik leaned against the doorframe. "Define fair." Barbara huffed, already losing patience. "The same amount you paid at auction." Malik let out a short laugh. "That's not how real estate works, Barbara." Richard sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Look," he said, his tone almost diplomatic, "we're trying to handle this like adults. We just want our home back." Malik studied them for a moment. He had no doubt that if the roles were reversed, Barbara would have done everything in her power to squeeze every last penny out of him. And now she stood in front of him, expecting a favor from the very person she had spent weeks trying to force out. He pushed off the doorframe and glanced toward the house. Given the location, the current market, and the unpaid fees attached to the property, the price is $450,000. Barbara's head snapped up. "That's outrageous." Malik shrugged. "That's the price." Barbara's hands balled into fists. "You're just trying to make a profit off of me." Malik's expression hardened. "No, Barbara. I'm treating you exactly how you treated me." Silence stretched between them. Barbara had spent weeks using the HOA as a weapon, making it clear that she believed she had the power to control who stayed and who left in this neighborhood. And now, standing on his porch, she was finally realizing that she had never actually been in control at all. Richard sighed again, shoulders slumping. "We'll consider it." Malik nodded. "Take your time." As they turned to leave, Barbara hesitated. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. It wasn't quite remorse, more like reluctant acceptance. She had lost, and for the first time, she knew it. "Barbara," Malik said, watching her carefully. She turned stiffly. "Next time you judge someone before knowing them," he said, gesturing toward her house, "remember where it got you." She didn't say a word, just turned and walked away. A month later, a for sale sign went up in front of 216 Oakwood Drive. Barbara and Richard had refused to buy back the house at Malik's price, and no bank would give them a loan for the amount they needed. So, in the middle of the night, they packed up and left. The neighborhood changed after that. Without Barbara at the helm, the HOA actually started working the way it was supposed to, handling real issues instead of policing nonsense. The rules weren't used as weapons anymore, and the people who had once whispered behind closed doors now seemed a little more willing to meet each other's eyes. Some still avoided Malik, too ashamed to acknowledge their silence during everything that had happened. But others... One afternoon, Malik was sitting on his porch when he spotted Lisa Hendricks, the neighbor who had voted against Barbara at the HOA meeting, walking up his driveway with a plate of cookies in her hands. She hesitated for a moment, then cleared her throat. "I know it's late," she said, shifting awkwardly, "but welcome to the neighborhood." Malik looked at the plate in her hands. He wasn't sure if the gesture was out of guilt or if it was genuine, but in the end, maybe it didn't matter. He smiled, taking the plate from her hands. "Took you long enough." Lisa chuckled, a little sheepish. "Yeah," she admitted. "It did." Malik took a bite of one of the cookies. Sweet, a little stale, but better late than never. Some people spend their lives trying to control others, believing that their power comes from rules, from status, from making others feel small. But real power, that comes from knowing exactly who you are, and refusing to let anyone take that away from you. If this story made you think, don't just scroll away. Take action. Like this video to help spread awareness. Share it with your friends and family, because conversations spark change. Comment below and tell us your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed an abuse of power? Let's talk about it. Follow our channel for more powerful real-life stories. And turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Change starts with awareness. Awareness starts with you. Be part of the movement.